Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Regan, and welcome to the Couples Strengthening series that I'm doing in February. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm really glad to have Allie Miller here. One of the reasons why I do this series is because I really want people to develop more skills about their couple relationship. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Susan Regan, and I'm a licensed family therapist in the Bay Area, a seasoned family therapist, and a certified mediator, and an online coach. So I work with relationships in all different aspects. And I really want to give people the skills they need to have the kind of relationships they want. And today I have Allie Miller on with me for a series on trying to strengthen the communication part of your relationship. So Allie, I'm so happy that you're here today. It's so great to have you here talking about your expertise. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Thanks, Susan. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm in Berkeley. And I've been studying nonviolent communication for about 14 years. So a big focus on my private practice is helping people cultivate the communication skills that it takes to have satisfying relationships. And I do that through individual therapy and group therapy, and also through couples counseling and couples communication workshops. And all of the communication skills that I share are rooted in nonviolent communication, which I'll go into in a little bit. And that's my understanding about why you invited me here, is to share some things about nonviolent communication with couples so that it can really support their relationship.
Right. And so recently when I thought about you, I thought about this couple that I was working with. And oftentimes in like therapy, when you do couple therapy weekly, it's really not enough support for the clients to not only tell you what's going on in their life, but to develop skills. And so I always feel like it's important for couples to know maybe a few areas of where they need to develop more skills so that they can practice their skills outside in the world and then come back and talk with me in couples therapy format about what's still problematic in their relationship. So I always feel like it's skills and insight and practice that helps people change their relationship. So when I thought of you, I thought of the nonviolent communication workshops you do, and that might really augment some of the work that I'm doing with couples. So I really thought it'd be great for you to describe it, what the technique is, what the framework is, and how you actually teach couples to do this.
Yeah, that's the reason I started the couples workshops. I started them in January of 2019, and I offer monthly workshops. They're 3 hours, usually on a Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon. So, a manageable chunk of time so that couples can sign up, get the core basic skills and principles of nonviolent communication, and then practice in their lives. One reason I started it was because I was noticing exactly what you talked about. Like in the couples therapy sessions, it's hard to both focus on listening to each person, helping them listen to each other, do the therapeutic work, and teach the skills. I mean, I do that, but it's challenging to fit all that in, like you were saying. So I developed these workshops so that people could come, just get the skills, just get the educational piece, and then use that in their work. So some of the couples I see in the workshops are also clients that I see in couples therapy, and some aren't. Some are, kind of like you, other therapists in the community who want their couple clients to have those core skills. So they come, they take the course, and then they go back to doing the work with with their couples counselor. Some aren't even in couples counseling at all and just, want the basics and then use that to practice at home with each other.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So could you, and I think you're bringing up one really key point is that when you're in a couple relationship and you're living life, time is really important. And so it's hard to fit in time. So I think having like a weekend group where people can actually go and do it in a morning instead of trying to cram it into their week, especially if they have kids, is ideal. So I think that's the other part, is that when couples relationships start getting stressful, life is stressful enough. So it's hard to figure out all these places where you're going to add new skill sets or new times to spend together, because it's, time is of the essence, right?
So NVC stands for Nonviolent Communication. It was developed in the 1960s by a psychologist and mediator named Marshall Rosenberg. Nonviolence is one word, and it's the English translation of the Sanskrit word ahimsa, which means non-harming or compassion. comes from Buddhism, Jainism, and Hinduism, and I think some other religions too. So it's this philosophy of doing no harm. And when we're talking about nonviolent communication, it's about doing no harm, it's about compassion. And so sometimes NVC is referred to as compassionate communication. So really the heart of the work is developing these skills so that the way we think, the way we speak, the way we listen is all in service of compassion. Some people call it connected communication because it's about creating connection. Some people call it empowered communication. So it's really about communicating in a way that creates more compassion and connection and doesn't cause harm. So often, especially I think in couples relationships, when we're most in pain, when we're most in distress, when we're most needing to be heard, we speak in ways that actually create disconnection and separation and alienation. And so a lot of the work is about how to express our pain, how to say help, like I need connection, in a way that actually makes it more likely that you're going to get that connection.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right? So most of us have been trained, like when we're in pain, we blame, we judge, we criticize, we make demands. So in the NVC approach, all of these things are considered violent. Nonviolent communication doesn't just mean like hitting or physical violence. It's really about how we're thinking and how we're speaking. So much of the training is about transforming blame, judgments, criticism, demands into what am I observing? What am I feeling? What am I needing? And what requests can I make to try to get these needs met?
Mm-hmm.
So those 4 steps is like the NVC formula: observation, feeling, need, request.
Mm-hmm.
So a big part of the workshop is working with all 4 of those. But the way I talk about it in the workshops I do is it's kind of like a sandwich where observation and requests are like the bread, and feelings and needs are like the meat or the heart of the sandwich. And so I spend a lot of times with couples in the workshops helping them develop a vocabulary of their feelings and needs. We all have the same universal human needs. People have been trained to share NVC all over the world in different countries. And when people ask, like, what do you need to thrive? People will come up with the same kinds of things like connection, belonging, affection, support, camaraderie, companionship, things like that, self-expression, meaning, purpose. So NVC trainers have created lists of these needs. And there's this linkage that happens in nonviolent communication that I haven't seen elsewhere, which is this idea that our feelings are messengers to our needs, that we feel certain feelings when we have unmet needs, and we feel other feelings when our needs are met. Mm-hmm. So like if I'm feeling really happy, I might ask, oh, what needs are met? If I'm feeling really angry or jealous or disappointed or hurt, I would ask, oh, what needs aren't met? Mm-hmm. So the directionality goes from what am I feeling to what am I needing, as opposed to what am I feeling? I shouldn't be feeling this way. It's your fault. Mm-hmm. So a lot of fights, right, in relationships start because we're feeling something that's difficult to feel, and then we want to blame somebody for that. So we look outside of ourselves for the cause of the feeling. And NVC practice is all about looking inside, not how am I to blame for this feeling, but, oh, what is this feeling telling me about what my needs are or what my values are or what matters to me here? Mm-hmm. And so that's going to really shift the conversation.
And I'm also thinking about the chronic pattern of unmet needs in relationships, right? And and I'm imagining that and that was my first scenario for you too, was the thought about how to help a couple that keeps having the same reoccurring fight. And I think when my imagination is like the more the unneeds met are, the stronger they are, the more the miscommunication happens. And then I'm also thinking that it makes me think that there needs to be a pacing down, that people also need to sort of check inside themselves and figure out what's going on in order to even get to the place where they're starting to try to communicate differently or inquire within themselves differently. Yeah.
Exactly. That's like the core skill. Like if there's one thing that I would say is most important in this communication practice, it's self-connection. It's knowing what's going on inside me. Because if I don't know what's going on inside me, I'm going to be blaming, judging, criticizing all over the place. Like, it's just, you got to know what's going on inside you in order to be heard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the idea is, like, if I'm talking, most likely it's because I want to be heard. So how can I express myself in a way that increases the likelihood that someone's going to be able to hear me, as opposed to increasing the likelihood that they're going to get defensive, right? Anytime someone hears like, oh, I did something wrong, or I'm to blame, you know, we're just human. We get defensive, and then we can't hear the other person. So a lot of the work is like knowing what's going on inside me on a feelings and needs level, so I can communicate that to increase the likelihood that I'll actually be heard and potentially even get my needs met.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with the scenario of the chronic fight that the couple has, the same fight that they have over and over again, another element of when I hear that scenario is that one person always feels like they're the one to blame for the problem. So how would you use NVC to break out of that? Like when one person feels like they're the identified problem in the relationship.
Yeah. Right. So there's, I mean, from the start, right, there's this blame dynamic. Like, I'm innocent, you're guilty. Or I'm guilty, you're innocent. I'm the one to blame, it's my fault, right? So that's all in the land of kind of judgment and analysis and blame. So then the work is to get in touch with, okay, so you could just start with like, what did I do wrong, quote unquote. In MVC, we don't use the ideas of right and wrong like that, but to just start the conversation, it's like, okay, so what are we saying I did wrong? To get clear on what the actual behavior is, that's the problem. And so that connects up with the observation, right? We talked about observation, feeling, need, request. Mm-hmm. So we want to start with, what's the observation? What is the behavior that we're saying is problematic? And then there's this NVC principle that says everything anyone says or does is an attempt to meet needs. That these universal human needs on this list I showed, that these are the motivations for everything we say and everything we do. So if the, you know, problematic behavior is like, you know, coming home really late, or whatever it is, like not listening or yelling, or we want to get curious, okay, what needs is that person attempting to meet by doing that behavior that we're labeling problematic? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense as a starting point?
Yes, it makes sense. Yeah. I'm also thinking about the person that's blaming also has these needs, and that's what they're trying to do by blaming, right? Is they're not getting that need met by asking for it or inquiring what it is that's going on for them.
Yes.
Like, I'm feeling like I'm not important to you.
Right. I have a need to matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's, I like that. I like how you broke it down and explained the history of it. And I think it is a skill development thing. So then in terms of people like starting to break down what they're doing, I also wanted to say that I will add those handouts that you said as a link here so people can see the examples of what you're talking about.
Right.
And there's another more complicated dynamic that I see. And I think this has to do with typically, you know, couples try to achieve a lot together. They buy houses, they have kids, they do have jobs, they do a financial picture together, and then they try to have an intimate relationship, a social life, and extended family, sharing extended family in some way. So I often see that couples are stressed out by all that they have to manage in their life, and that leads to a lot of miscommunication and unmet needs. So how do you deal with external stressors and the theory of nonviolent communication, or the technique of nonviolent communication?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's be real. Like, there are so many stressors in the modern world. And when we're trying to maintain a connection and an intimate relationship, there are a lot of constraints. There are a lot of stresses just in being an intimate relationship in a, world that doesn't really support families that well. So, we're all kind of in our separate little boxes. And so there's not a lot of community support, which makes it much more difficult. I just want to acknowledge that. And so ideally, and this is never easy, and sometimes it's not even apparently possible, but ideally we have other sources for support, that we're not just leaning on our partner for emotional support, right? That if there's some sort of conflict between me and my partner, I have somewhere else to go, ideally a couple of different strategies, a couple of different options to get heard, to get emotional support, so that I can then come back to my partner and actually be able to listen to them, right? So much of what I see in my practice is like both partners are dealing with so much stress and needing so much support that neither actually has the capacity to be there for the other, which is really common and also really tragic, because usually when relationships start out, it's like, there's so much mutual support. And then as all these life stressors that you described come in, it's just, there's less time, there's less space, there's more competing things in our lives. So it's one reason I'm such a big fan of both NVC and therapy, because it's like you're finding outside sources of support to nurture your relationship.
Right. And it just highlights the point that your partner can't be the solution to everything that's going on in your life that's not working. So really seeking help, however you do that, is about diminishing the intensity that you're putting on the relationship, and that you're bringing in sort of new ideas and new ways to solve things to your partner, perhaps. Like that might be another way to connect, and that there are ways that you might be able to make a pure connection around the needs that do work, that you can meet in your partner. Like we can't meet all of our needs in our partners. We just can't. It also makes me think about the stigma about getting help. So a lot of times I see people in couples therapy, and they really have lived with these chronic patterns and this conflict for a really long period of time. And then it's so hard to break out of it because there's so much hurt and pain. And I know that going to therapy sometimes is a lot easier than going to a couples workshop, because of people might feel self-conscious, or maybe it's a brave thing to do. But I remember myself going to couples workshops and thinking I was with my people that were really trying to work on their relationship. And once I saw that, I was like, oh, there's a whole population of people who understand that this is normal stress, that it's not stress that's going to, that the relationship can survive this stress if you get the right kind of help. And that there's a whole lot of people in the world that are struggling in relationship in the exact same way.
Right.
And development of skill set, like having a good couple relationship is a skill set that you develop over a period of time. That you're not just like born with it and you just don't know it, off the top of your head. You learn it.
Right. Yeah. And we weren't really taught it. I don't know really anyone who was taught it.
Right. Because then we're going back to our models of relationships, and we're also going back to in probably our models, people probably weren't going to therapy or educated as much about emotions as we are currently in our society. So it is, or in the Bay Area, maybe not everywhere, but in the Bay Area, there's pockets of people who really seek out knowledge about how to do relationship communication better. And this is one of the vehicles, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're sort of separating out, like, yes, stressors are real. Stressors aren't going to be all solved by nonviolent communication, because we have to also put the stressors in place. But the aspects of how you communicate about stressors can shift. That with the NVC.
Yeah. Yeah. And anything NVC you could think needs, like they are kind of synonymous. Like if I'm in NVC land, I'm thinking about needs. And so with stresses, one way to work with them or to understand them is like, okay, what are the unmet needs? And it's not like I mean, we don't live in a utopia yet, and we're human, right? So it's not like we're going to get all our needs met all the time.
Right.
But can we identify the needs and can we hold them with care? That's how we talk about it. Like, can we hold the needs with care? Like, this matters. Like, rest matters. You know, like downtime matters. You know, financial security matters, right? Like, as we're trying to figure out how to make a life where we have more rest, where we have more financial security, where we have more time for loving connection, like, even if we haven't arrived, can we hold that that's what we're up to? We're trying to meet these needs. And with NVC, it's really about attempting, my understanding of NVC is that we're attempting to meet everybody's needs, not just our own. So this is another key piece about how NVC is helpful in relationships. A lot of times fights end up being like, who's right, who's wrong, who's going to win, who's going to lose. And NVC is like, how can we actually attend to both of our needs? How can we, and that starts with identifying what they are.
But how about the couple who hasn't sought treatment and has been in conflict for a long time? How would you get them into this mindset so that they could practice it? How could you get them out of anger and fighting into this mindset?
Yeah, so I think of conflict as we're both trying to get our needs met and we're not getting our needs met. That's why we're fighting. So to really get curious about, okay, so what are the underlying needs here that I'm trying to get met through fighting, right? Like, what is the beautiful underlying value or thing that matters to me that is motivating all this anger, that is kind of behind all this adversarial kind of way of communicating?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It shifts, it shifts the whole conversation from like, you're a jerk, you're rude, you're the problem, to, mm-hmm. Oh, I'm really longing for this. Are you really longing for that?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes. So it's a shifting of the conversation and getting people to start getting out of almost a superficial conflict part of the conversation, which is the distancer, to getting more into the compassionate part of the conversation, which is, wait, there's needs here that aren't being met on both sides.
Exactly.
Maybe start by just understanding what those are.
That's right. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So just with the whole problematic part about couples having time to do their work or to develop more skills, what other ways could they be exposed to NVC work, aside from like going to therapy or going to a workshop? Or what's another way that they might be able to do that, to get the information?
I mean, the great thing now about all these online resources is that there's a lot of online opportunities. So like, I teach through Mindful Schools, a mindful communication course, which is basically NVC combined with mindfulness.
Uh-huh.
So that's one way, Mindful Schools. I also support, kind of co-teach a course, an online course called Introduction to Connected Communication, which is an NVC course. And then there's the NVC Academy. NVCacademy.com has tons of courses. Bay NVC is a local organization that offers courses both online and in person. Mm-hmm. And then a good place to go is the Center for Nonviolent Communication website, which is cnvc.org. And there's a lot of resources there.
Mm-hmm. So I'll be sure to include those links for people, just so that they can get an introduction on their own and decide what format's going to work best for them to do the work. But I'm really so happy that you identified. I felt like you did a really great job on just identifying the 4 parts: observing, feeling, needing, and request in the sandwich. I really like that. I think that's a real manageable way of thinking about something, that, the observing is first, the request is last, and the in-between is translating the feelings and the needs. I think it's a really great shortcut to even getting people to think about that now, who might be listening to this video, is like, there's ways to slow down and reframe how you're considering conflict in your relationship. or stress in your relationship, that there's a way to talk about it that isn't just going back into that stress or conflict pattern.
Yes, right. So it's like, what happened? That's the observation. How am I feeling in relation to what happened? What are my feelings telling me about what's important to me here, or my needs? And what would I like the other person to do to help me meet my needs?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. So I think as a final summary, I wonder if you could share a way that NVC has changed maybe your connections with people. You know, I'm sure people use it. I know people will use it in all their relationships, not just their intimate partners, because I think it's a really great philosophy to consider. But if you were going to think about what's been so inspiring about the work personally.
Yeah. So much, but I feel in this moment, what comes up most is self-compassion. Like in a lot of my relationships, one thing that has come up for me is like self-blame, self-criticism. And there's like a shutting down that happens, and like a kind of a withdrawal that happens. And with NVC training, with this emphasis on, oh, my feelings are letting me know that I have needs and my needs matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just been, with all the NVC training, it's been drilled into my head over and over again that my needs matter. So that helps me have more compassion for myself, that if I'm having a reaction to something that somebody else did, it matters. So the inner critic that used to come in all the time to kind of diminish my experience and keep me kind of quiet is way softer. I hardly even hear that critic anymore. And when I do, I know that even the critic is attempting to meet needs. So I just have a much more like peaceful relationship with myself, and more confidence that, oh, I can actually express myself to try to get my needs met in my relationships, while also being open to the other person's needs. So it's not like I was saying before, it's not like me versus the other person. It's like, oh, my needs matter, your needs matter. Can we work together so that we both know that we matter in this relationship?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I really, because I really believe in relationships. I believe in relationship as the healer, that is, and I believe in relationships as far as they can be healthy. Like we can learn to have healthier relationships where we've come from. But in terms of relationships in general, I think the only way to really build the base is to have this really healthy relationship with yourself. And the luxury of maybe being therapists is that we're always thinking about the work of doing therapy and working on ourselves. So it's a constant, for me, it's been a constant reminder. So it's the luxury of being in the field and always being very cognizant of the work that I need to do to be able to develop myself to be with people in a healing way. But in terms of the future and just building the blocks of having a healthy relationship or having the kind of relationship you want, the key, I think, is just continuing to work on yourself. So I really like how you said, like when you got that down, when you started to, know that you mattered or that you had needs that were unmet, you could start addressing them yourself. And then you had a lot more room to be available to somebody else. And that's so important, because I think sometimes when we're not doing our own work, we don't have any idea where all our angst is coming from.
Yeah.
And all of our pushing somebody away or distancing or getting into unhealthy dynamics, we can't see clearly.
Yeah.
So, working on oneself is the way to having healthy relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good. Is there anything else you want to say in summary? Is there any other ways that you might want to tell people about things that you're going on, or ways that they could keep in touch with you? We'll have links available after the talk.
Great. Yeah. I mean, the quickest, easiest way to get this is to sign up for my 3-hour workshop, and I offer them monthly. The next one's February 15th. The following one is March 7th. Then I'm going to take a few months off and start up again in the fall. They're just 3 hours, just 3 couples. So it's in my office. It's it's very comfortable, kind of low key situation. And yeah, I really encourage people who are watching, if this has piqued your interest, to reach out to me and to come and learn with me.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being available for this talk. And I also wanted to just say that you'll see on this link, a link to be able to sign up for my newsletter, because I'll be offering 4 couple strengthening relationship talks this month of February. And there'll be a 4-week, it's called the 30-day challenge for couples, where people get to really look each week at one aspect of their relationship and dig into practicing trying to make that relationship aspect better. So that's another way to get some information and get some skill building that follows these kind of talks. So thank you everyone for listening. We welcome your emails if you have questions or you want to get in touch with us. And thanks again, Allie. It was so great to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Susan. It was really a pleasure.
Okay, bye for now.